To live a better life is take radical responsibility for everything in your life. The only reason your life sucks is because you let it. People are scared by this idea that everything in their life is their fault, right? When in reality, if we take radical accountability for everything in our life, and I say, yes, all of the bad things that have happened to me are my fault. Well, I just made my life a lot easier, and all of a sudden I'm free, because if it's all my fault, that means that I have the power to change all of it.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. And in this episode, I have an awesome guest who actually has a pretty similar journey to me. And it's pretty crazy because this is the first time that we've actually interacted. We're sharing stories behind the scenes. And I'm like, dude, this guy has a very similar story to mine, but was able to do it in his own way. And now he's helping a lot of entrepreneurs actually help use the tactics that he used in order to scale to multiple millions of dollars per year in just a few short years. So with that said, Champ, welcome to the podcast.
Appreciate you having me, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, dude. Absolutely. I think it was pretty cool. We were talking about prior to the show, like you literally got into crypto early. Then you started using marketing and doing .com secrets and stuff in order to build your pillars and really then go help people. So let's talk about how you got into crypto first, because I find it so fascinating when people our age rode that way from 2015, 2016. So how'd you get involved?
Sure. So do you remember right before the very first true crypto bull market? It was like right around Christmas of that year. Do you remember like around that time?
Yeah.
So I was at home with my family for the holidays, and my older brother and I at this time just spent a lot of time on the internet, right? So on pretty like obscure subreddits, on a bunch of different forums, and I was always like trying to figure out how to make more money. This was back before there was even like a separation of Binance and Binance US, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you're using the original just pure Binance interface. It's super janky, right? It's like challenging to use. I barely even know what I'm doing at this time, right? And my older brother's kind of helping me out with it. I put in like $200 at this time, right? And in this first crypto bull market, I turned $200 into a few thousand. And at this time, right, I have no money. And of course, I rode that back down to zero, literally zero. But that was like a really pivotal and fundamentally like shaping experience for me.
Yeah.
Because, and maybe you had a similar experience, right? Like unequivocally throughout all of my friends who have made millions and millions of dollars in these markets, every single one of them had at least one cycle, and in many cases two, where they completely fucked it up and lost all the money that they made.
Yeah.
So like that was a very important experience for me, wherein I saw like, okay, first of all, it's possible to create wealth in a way that I thought was impossible. And then also, if I don't do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to lose all of it, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, when I first did it too, I think I flipped like $1,500 at the peak. It was worth like 250 grand. And I was like, what the hell? That's real? Like that just happened? I know I had that shock value and that shock factor. And so were you in college at the time?
Yeah. I was in school. Jobs? I was in school I had no money, dude. So it planted this seed in my mind, and I never lost interest because at this time especially, still nobody even really understood it. It's a much more niche thing to be involved in crypto, right? I knew almost nobody else except for like one or two friends of mine who Ethereum was at like, I don't even know what it was at, maybe like a few $100, and they were like, yeah, like, you need to buy this coin too. I was like, dude, I don't know. It's already up. So, you know what I mean? And it's just crazy to sort of reflect on these experiences. But from that moment onwards, right, I stayed, thank God, heavily interested in the space. And that obviously, paid dividends for me years later down the line, not only as an investor and as a consumer, but also, building things in the space as well. So I stumbled across it on like the deep, dark corners of the internet, and it changed my life for it. So
yeah, I think that's a really cool, not only testimony to it, but I think also it's a good example. I kind of learned it just from hearing from a friend, but I think overall, it's a good example of when you find something that you can implement and that you can test out and you take action on it. The worst possible scenario is that, hey, didn't work out. Right. And in crypto, we ride a cycle. We all go to zero or something, or we lose money in it. But you took action on new information that you got. And I think a lot of people, especially our age, they're too skeptical. They're too cool to accept something new. And, even the older people that haven't adopted crypto yet, they're still kind of in that category because they're making money in real estate and just kind of the old school ways. But let's talk about how important that is, especially, in our formative years, taking new information, and implementing it as fast as possible. Like, tell me about your journey with that.
Yeah, dude. Okay. So let's say, how old was I at this time? 19. Yeah. Okay, cool. What do I have to lose? Everything. Okay. What if I lose everything? I'm 19. Do it again. I still think that way. Right? I'm a risk-on person. I like to think I'm kind of risk-averse compared to some of my friends, but I'm a risk-on person compared to probably like your average 30 or 40-year-old. What do I have to lose? Everything. Yeah. Okay. The skills I built along the way, I'll get it back. Right? Like, that's how I've always operated. So your question was about, like, how important is it to learn new information and act on it quickly? That's everything, right? And I think that one of the biggest differentiators between people who are very successful and who are very wealthy, and people who aren't, is the speed at which they take new information and make decisions with it, right? Because, and we're talking about crypto, it's a very good example, right? Like, so the time period between when I sort of learned about all these markets and between when this first bull market happened, that if I knew what I do now would have cemented me all the way back then, right? Was like a week. Okay. Which means that every day that I spent sitting around like, oh yeah, no, I'll sign up for Binance. I'll make this wallet of this. Every day that I spent picking like that, cost me thousands of dollars, right? And depending on your investment size, would have cost me millions of dollars. And I think that goes for business. I think that goes for health. And I think that I know that all of the people who I've seen generate the most money at the youngest age and do things that the rest of the world deem impossible, their superpower is simply the ability to learn information. And instead of sitting around, should I try? They just do it, right? And if they fail, they just, okay, try something else. Yeah. And it's not a coincidence, right, that the most successful and famous entrepreneurs of our generation, you look at guys like Elon, all these other guys, that their MO is try shit, break shit, try again over and over, right? So I think that oftentimes preparation and planning is procrastination in disguise. And that the biggest unlock that I had over the past 2 years was to stop wasting time making sure I'm ready, and that truthfully, I don't need to plan steps 1 to 10 before I start doing something. But actually, as soon as I have 1 and 2, I need to go, because I'm going to do 1, and then 2 through 10 are going to get completely torn apart because step 1 is not going to go how I imagined it. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a good point too, because I just actually made a video about this, but it's kind of like if you're procrastinating a lot or you're trying to get prepped before the actual move, it's almost like a sense of control that you're trying to deploy with your current thinking. And if it is something new to you, you obviously don't know anything.
Yeah, does it exist?
Just go. Don't hold yourself back because you want this mechanism of control to feel like you're empowered by it. Just fucking run. You'll figure it out along the way. And I think a lot of people even do that in business too. I'm not ready to launch the app. I'm not ready to test this out. The creative's not done, whatever. Just fucking go. You're going to figure out what you are going to miss or what needs to be in place before you actually expand further. But it's getting that first initial feedback. So we talked about it in crypto, but now you're going through this whole marketing journey now of helping people and establishing their foundations as a man, their foundations, taking advantage of these new age things. So tell me about kind of what you're doing in that space now that we're kind of in the crypto cycle, the bull cycle now.
Yeah, so maybe I should sort of explain the journey or the timeline that I've been on. But there were 2 very pivotal moments in my life. The The first of which was whenever I launched my first internet business, which is a business that I still run, which is, we're actually, on the top of crypto, one of the largest trading communities on the internet. I launched 1,444 one-year access passes to that community while I was muted on a Zoom call at my old job, and generated 10 years worth of my salary in 30 minutes. And I quit my job on that Monday, and spent the next year building out that business. But what I do now is, I'm still very heavily invested and involved in the crypto space, but the content that I create now and the other business that I'm largely focused on has nothing to do with the crypto space, right?
Right.
And it has everything to do with empowering people to build businesses online, to change their life, and like really just get people to understand that all of these things that they think are impossible are completely possible if you have. We all have little pocket supercomputers, right? And you don't even need Wi-Fi anymore. You have 5G. Yeah. Are possible, right? And I told you earlier, there's sort of two pivotal moments in my life. And the other one was reading a book that you have over there on that bookshelf that we just talked about. It's .com Secrets by Russell Brunson.
Yeah.
Right? So learning what a marketing and sales funnel is the most important thing that I ever did in my entire life. And I told you before we started that book that before we started this podcast, that book is the only book I've ever read in my life to which I can directly attribute over $1 million. Right? Like, if I had not read that book, my entire life would be different. Because it completely shifted my sort of perspective and thinking about how to do business online. And I think whenever you grow up and like, whenever you sort of, what is the average human being's, what informs the average human being's perspective on how to create and market products, like Shark Tank, and like, you know what I mean? Like, you have all these sort of traditional ideas about business.
Yeah.
And then you read books like this and you study some of the greatest entrepreneurs of our generation, and it's like, no, these guys are making millions and millions and millions of dollars without running a single ad, and by leveraging free platforms that we all have access to, right? And building a couple websites. So I spent the next year, as I sort of shifted my focus, learning how to become a high-level entrepreneur, learning how to build products that are not physical, but that are me using my brain and packaging up information experiences in ways that are valuable enough that I can share them with people and they want to pay me for it. And then really growing like a true zone of genius and expertise around how to build a large personal brand, to drive organic traffic, and then converting that organic traffic in a meaningful way into revenue for a stack of info products, right? Which I told you before we sort of got on here. Mm-hmm. That all probably sounds kind of like marketing mumbo jumbo. What that actually means is really just like living as good, meaningful, and productive of a life as possible when it comes to health, when it comes to wealth, when it comes to mindset, documenting that process and letting people pay me if they want to get closer to me in that process. Like, that's really it, right?
Yeah, you said a really good point, and I'm glad you brought up the mumbo jumbo of marketing, because once people hear personal brands and funnels, are like, it's all the same thing. It's all, I've been pitched that before, blah, blah, blah. But when you really harness that barrier, when you get over it, and then you create that proximity effect closer to you and your program, or closer to me with my stuff, like when you have that mechanism and that leverage there, you actually build really cool communities and build really great relationships because they want to get closer to the fire. And that's how I first started too. I was drafting behind people that were already executing on what I saw myself in the jazz. And then that helped enable me and give me permission to actually execute and do the thing and be in a quote unquote club, but also just build real relationships at the end of the day with like-minded people. Could be about fitness, could be about health, could be about business, could be about crypto, could be about anything. But finding that person is so important to follow, and then pay the person. Like, get in front of them, get their attention by paying them so they pay attention to you. And that's an investment into yourself so you can actually go build something really cool.
mentors are the most important thing in the world, dude. Like, I would not have accomplished anything that I have. I really would have nothing if I hadn't met the right people who mentored me, right? And I will, like, forever give credit to everybody that helped me. And people have this sort of, like, fundamental misunderstanding of the whole sort of, like, mentorship and course space. And it's so funny, right? Because it's completely accepted, and it's actually, like, you know, championed as, like, sort of the best path for the average person to, and I went to college, by the way. Right? And I wouldn't change a single thing about my life, because it all, you know, like, snowball affected into where I am right now. And I think if you like re-roll my life 1,000 times, I'm living like the one of those 1,000 that ended up in this perfect, like, scenario that I've written. Yeah. So I don't regret anything. But it's normalized, and it's like I said, even champion, okay, go spend $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year over college. And it's like, it's common knowledge that, like, okay, yeah, you'll use maybe 1% of this, but it's like, oh, it's good for networking, you have a fun experience, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas the average person will look at, like, $100 course online wherein they can go learn from somebody who has done the exact skill that they want to learn and publicly documented it, and they're like, no, that's a scam, right? Like, I'm not going to do it. And it's hilarious, because all of the richest people that I know spend the most money still on courses and on masterminds, right? Right. And this was a huge unlock for me, right? So when I was at so actually the reason why I went to Capital Clubs, a bit run by my friend Luke. Everybody watching this podcast is probably familiar with Luke Belmont. I had a huge year on socials over the last 2 years. Yeah. And the main reason why I went to that is because Luke's a friend of mine. But of course, you probably do the same thing with your friends. Like, when I go to my friends' events, I pay them, right? Mm-hmm. And if I always offered for my friends to come to my events for free, but, like, whenever and I go, this was like over the last summer, and I'm at Capital Club, and there's a bunch of people there that are richer than me, that are more successful than me, that have bigger audiences, who are still spending way more than me to go to networking events. And I was like, huh? Right? And then the average human reaction to these events, you know, if you tell somebody you spent $15,000, $20,000 on a 3-day event, is like, there's no way that can be worth it, right? Because the average person thinks in these sort of black and white ROI, very transactional terms. But the reality is, maybe you buy this course, you go to this event, and you meet one person who planted the seed in your mind on accident. And that gets you introduced to another person who subsequently puts another idea in your mind, who gets you to read a book you wouldn't have otherwise read, which then leads you down a new path or a new industry. And in 6 years, that's made you however many dollars, right? So it's about, like, exposure to information. And the point that I'm trying to make is that as soon as I, like, decoupled every single, like, self-investment I'm making from, like, is this going to pay me back twofold in the next 6 months? Mm-hmm. And I started not being reckless, but being willing to more heavily invest in myself in ways that were, like, a little bit less concrete, harder for me to see. My life immediately started changing. People here that I liked, that I think I would probably be friends with when I moved here, like Colin lives here, who you had on the show. Yeah. Some people that I work with live here, but there was no, like, okay, if I move to Miami, I'm gonna spend an extra $2,000 a month, but it'll pay me an extra 20. You know, none of that, right? Mm-hmm. But I can't even tell you, like, the ROI that I've gotten from coming here, and the connections that I've made, and the business that I've done, and the lifestyle changes that I've made. So I think that the average person could afford to actually be a lot more what they would consider reckless when it comes to self-investment, right? And every single time I've done something that feels like a risk, it's paid off like 100x. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to do more of that in 2024.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point too, because I've invested probably $500,000 just in the masterminds, coaches, consultants. So I was a little reckless at the beginning because I just didn't know what I didn't know. I was buying everything and really just trying to absorb it all. But you made a good point where it's if the people that you are trying to aspire to be like are also making those investments, you have to exchange that energy. Like you have to remove self-identity and ego and that fear to actually put yourself in the room. Because if you're not in the room, you're not playing the game, you're always going to be the same way that you are. So it's kind of like if it doesn't hurt bad enough with where you're currently at, if you're too comfortable, if you're lazy, if you don't want to actually become someone or something, then cool, stay home. But if you actually want to make changes, you have to change. And that's parting with the money that you have to receive new information, because where you pay attention. So I think that was a really good point. Man, I'm still going through a lot of these books. I'm probably like 80% done, but I got a lot more to go.
Yeah, I'm looking at a lot of these. So you got a couple of Ray Dalio books over there. You got a lot of good books over here.
Yeah, man. Ty Lopez, dude. Ty Lopez got me on that old knowledge deal because I was in college at the time, and that's how I originally got into marketing. I just made money in crypto, and then I was like, okay, getting hit with these ads. I'm like, all right, what's the social media thing? And I saw it with a Lambo and then a bunch of books in the background. I was like, oh, that's 1-to-1. Like, yeah, read more books, you probably get a Lambo. Like that's what the ad did for me. So I was like, okay, cool. So I just started reprogramming myself with new books and all that stuff. And so I'm sure you're the same way. You said .com Secrets was your favorite book, or that's the one that had the best ROI. What are some other books that you've read that you would recommend other entrepreneurs to read, whether it's personal development, finance, or just about life in general?
Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. One of the most important books that I've ever read. Amazing book. And then there's sort of like a whole series of spin-off books about the principle of Stoicism, like The Obstacles Away and a couple other ones sort of in that niche that I liked a lot. Of course, .com Secrets, Expert Secrets, Traffic Secrets, that whole trilogy by Russell Brunson, exceptionally important. That's the first book I would ever read if I was trying to make money online. There's a book called How to Start a Cult by Jody Rainsford, which is kind of a crazy name, but exceptionally important book. And I would challenge anybody who's watching this podcast to go read that if they think it sounds like a crazy book to read. It's a marketing book. Go read that book, then go on YouTube and watch 3 Iman Gadzhi videos, and every single principle mentioned in that book, or any other big YouTuber for that matter, is going to be used, right? And what's very funny about so many of these marketing books is that like all of the information you need to become an enigmatic and captivating individual, you can get spending like $50 on books. But instead you want to sit here and watch 1,000 self-help podcasts a day and not do anything instead of turning off your fucking, can I say bad words? Instead of turning off your fucking laptop for 5 minutes and reading, right? You could read these books in 5 days. How to Build a Cult by Jody Rainsford. You're going to read that book and realize that this is the reason why all these YouTubers that you watch captivate you so much on that topic. Influenced by Robert Cialdini, which I'm sure you've read. Similarly, if you read that book and you go watch all your favorite influencers, all 6 of those principles are going to be heavily used in all of the content that they're creating. The Art of War by Sun Tzu is a classic, although like I think that book's a little bit overrated. Like I think for the average person, it's going to take a lot of effort to read that book and be like, here's how I implement this into my business strategy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those are all books that I like a lot. Let me think have you ever read the book, The Lords of Easy Money?
Lords of Easy Money. Yes. It's red cover, right?
Yeah, big red cover. That's a really, really good book. I think that like on the topic of not, losing your ass every single crypto bull market, the reason why most people get completely wrecked is because they have a fundamental misunderstanding of how money works, or rather the fact that like money is not real. And that there's an entire separate game being played at levels that you don't even understand. That book, I think for the average person, is the easiest way to understand how the Fed works, what money supply is, and what inflation actually means.
Right.
So that's a book that I would really, really recommend as well. Let me think if there's one. Sorry, I know I'm kind of going to a tangent here. Let me think if there's one other book. I mean, actually, Principled by Ray Dalio and The Changing World Order, both of which you have on that bookshelf over there, are really good. But there's one other one that I wanted to tell you that I can't remember.
I had it happening earlier. I was trying to tell our guy Chris from here behind the scenes. I was like, dude, what is this book that helped me? And it probably took me like 5 or 7 minutes to figure it out.
I don't know. I'll just throw any 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene's a good book too. But you probably noticed I speak about this. Like my taste in books is essentially like entirely formulated around. I know what I was thinking of. It goes with say marketing. There's a book called Making Them Believe by Dan Kennedy, he's a marketing legend. Yeah, Making Them Believe by Dan Kennedy. It's literally a book about one of the most legendary and sketchiest marketers of our time, who essentially posed as a doctor and sold like this crazy medicine, but made millions and millions of dollars. And it's just a book about like all of the pseudo unethical marketing tactics that he used. But I think it's a really interesting book for anyone who's trying to learn about like human psychology and how to become more interesting, right? Because I would argue that like, in my opinion, this idea of there being people who like make a bunch of money online with personal brands and then like successful CEOs who are like all behind the scenes and have no personal brands, like I think that's going to become completely outdated. I think that essentially everybody who is successful and makes a lot of money in an increasingly digital world, right? Like Apple's about to release the Vision Pro. It's going to be metaverse. Like we're going to live in augmented reality and anyway, be increasingly glued to our phones. This idea of being super rich, successful without having any sort of prominent online presence, I think is going to completely vanish, right? So I would argue that in the future, the most important skill is going to be captivating audiences, learning how to gather attention, and being a persuasive, enigmatic person. So like almost everything I read has to do with that, has to do with mindset, has to do with marketing or the fundamentals of how money works.
Yeah.
Because all of those things are kind of connected.
For sure. And I think it's an alternative way for personal brands to actually gain trust with audience. Marketing or whether it's e-com or whatever, that stuff is so quick to adapt if you're trying to be on cutting edge stuff. So you can be that, you can play that game, but stuff like finance, where it has a similar tempo, but there's a lot more fundamentals that go into it. I think it provides entrepreneurs like yourself, me, others that we hang out with, a cool voice to instill into the younger generation. And people that are coming up in college came from the similar situation that we did, because it's readily available. And I think that the distance between, basically someone going from their college classes to marketing, it's pretty one-to-one. You're already on your phone. Like, you already get it. But I think finance isn't explained further enough. And so I think it's really cool that this younger demo can latch onto that, and it builds a lot more trust. What is that next evolution? And I think it's a responsibility that we hold to show them stuff and teach them, but I think it's really cool. So what are your thoughts on what the impact looks like? What do you think our future looks like with the younger generation, with all these personal brands popping up?
It's a really good question. To be honest, I think I'm optimistic, but I'm also concerned, because I think that this red pill movement, and you know what I mean when I say red pill, right? And I let me be very clear. I'm saying this as somebody who creates content largely for men between the age of 16 and 25, because the angle from which I speak is the person to whom I'm most qualified to educate, which is essentially myself 6 years ago. Sure, right? And I don't mean to sound hypocritical, because I understand that a lot of what I create is adjacent to this sort of niche on the internet. But at the same time, like everything that I create has to do with self-improvement, betterment of self, understanding how to make more money, taking care of your health and fitness, and just becoming a better rounded individual. But I understand that and I have a lot of friends in that space too. It's fine. Point is, I think that this red pill space is like 99% bullshit. And I think that, as a matter of fact, almost this entire genre of content is actually predicated on the idea that all of these people think that their audience is full of insecure idiot kids. And that, like, the easiest out, if you want to convince a 15-year-old that you are somebody that should pay attention to, is to create content that preys on and appeals to all their insecurities, right? Oh, the reason girls don't like you is because all women are stupid, right? Let's create a podcast and have on only women from a tiny subset of the internet and degrade and make fun of them for an hour and convince our entire audience that this is representative of the entire female sex.
And that's where like the distribution is crazy with the entertainment of that stuff.
And the reality is this, like, I think that it's easy to get sucked into this like really small, tiny little view when you're an impressionable kid of how the world actually works. And it's, again, like, I have huge respect for all these guys that are big in the space, but at the same time, like, and you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. You know exactly what I'm talking about. There's an entire subset of content that, again, is like really designed and predicated upon like appealing to impressionable young kids who simply want to be told that girls are stupid, and who simply like want to be told that their problems aren't actually their fault, right? It creates sort of this toxic thing. But at the same time, I also think that a lot of very controversial figures on the internet are actually providing a lot of value to not just like young men, but young people. And it's challenging because the information is so democratized, right? Mm-hmm. And now Tucker Carlson does more impressions on Twitter than Fox News does.
Yeah.
Right? And in 5 or 10 years, I don't know where we go, but my hope is that we can continue to platform and empower people whose mission it is to be honest about their journeys, to be forthcoming about the fact that none of us actually know everything. So I think it's good to be exposed to a wide variety of values, right? But not sort of indoctrinated in a way that there's like one pure correct view. You know what I mean? And like that we can hopefully use the internet to subvert all of these, you know, bullshit, candidly, like mind control news outlets and get people to think for themselves. But I think it'd be stupid to not acknowledge the fact that we can really quickly swing in the other direction, where like just because the power has shifted into the hands of independent content creators who are also motivated by money, just like these news outlets, that it's not easy to sort of get right back into this world where the things people are consuming aren't always created with their best intentions in mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think you said that very, very well, where the content creator may know what it is that they are wanting to get out of that end user, especially if they are into marketing, they understand propaganda, they understand the behind the scenes of what's needed to propagate a belief, like they get it. I think you made a really interesting point specifically around the pendulum swinging back into the hands of or freedom content creator / right wing, or not even right wing, but red pill, like you said, not agenda, but a force. And I think that force, to me, how I visualize it, it's like a football, and that thread is coming undone. It's kind of like opening up into the minds of kids, more of those threads, and just feeding them new information, a new perspective. So what do you see, especially as, you know, we're on that side with info products, even, you know, I've marketed a lot of those info products. What do you see on the back end of that when it comes to leading people to a certain outcome? Because a lot of people, when they invest in courses, They may go get it because they want X money back, or they want X desired reality back. But that's all designed from the person that creates the course or creates the info product to get them from A to B. So how do you feel personally with your products and what you want to help people with? How do you feel that the design, and how much thought have you put into the design of that roadmap for people?
It's a really good question. So everything that I create is and will forever be underlined with life fundamentals. And what I mean by that is that if I put out any sort of product, right, or create any sort of experience with the intention of that user or buyer being put in a better situation by the time they finish using it, I'm not going to subvert any of the base level life fundamentals that make it all possible. What do I mean by this? So I could go, me 6 years ago, I could go buy 10 courses about how to make money online, right? I could watch all of them. But if I am not fundamentally sound and prepared as a human being to be the guy who can actually take advantage of this stuff and use it to better myself, it's useless. This is the same reason why your average kid sits and watches 10 hours of self-help podcasts a week, does nothing, and feels like they are becoming accomplished, right? Because there's prerequisites that you have to accomplish as a human being to be able to actually use information, right? And there's still information that there are books that I could read right now that are not actionable for me, right? So for example, I could go start reading literature about how to manage a $500 million portfolio. That's not useful to me because I don't have $500 million. However, if we dial that all the way back, consuming courses about how to start making money online are not useful to you if you don't even understand how to organize your life and cultivate the mindset that is going to allow you to actually act on this on a daily basis. I say all that to say that as I create products that are designed to help people, I will always include as much sort of base level information as I can about what I've learned, right, in the past year. Because in the past year, you can go look at videos or pictures of me from a year ago. What I've learned about how to become a healthier, more productive, and more organized individual is literally written all over my body. I don't have to tell people because they can see how my face has changed, right? I go home for Thanksgiving and my family's asking me why I look 2 years younger than when they saw me 6 months ago, right? So number one is including information about how to actually unfuck your life at a baseline level so that the rest of what I and my collaborators include is not lost on you. Mm-hmm. And two, I will always be very forthcoming about how this shit works, which is that nothing works if you don't do the work, right? Like, if you are not highly motivated, if you are not somebody who just needs that sort of missing link of information to then take the action and go do what you need to do, like, I'm not here to sell at all costs. And as a matter of fact, I don't want anybody to interact with anything that I've made who is not highly motivated and trying to make themselves a better person, a better entrepreneur, more money, right? So like, I will never, ever, ever get on camera and be like, oh, here's the free money glitch for anybody who wants to make it. Like, no, dude, that's not how this shit works. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason why such a small percentage of human beings ever accomplish what people like you or any other people that you've had on this podcast have accomplished, when in reality, when you make it to the other side of it, you're like, oh my God, it's actually pretty simple, right? Yeah. It's not like these complex things that you have to be some incredibly intelligent individual to do, but no, it's just that most people simply will never try and will sit and deny the fact that all the information they need to make millions of dollars is available to them on the internet and in books they could buy for $20. Yeah. And instead will point the finger and say, no, it's not my fault, right? Like, anything but taking responsibility for it. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of on it right here. I'll stop talking again. But like the last thing on this topic that I want to say is that the most important thing that you can do to live a better life is take radical responsibility for everything in your life, right? And I was speaking about this on Instagram this morning, and I said that the only reason your life sucks is because you let it. And let me add on to that when I was 15 years old, I laid out a detailed plan for how I was going to take my own life. I know what it feels like to want to die, right? To be hopeless, right? So I'm not speaking about this from a perspective of somebody who is inexperienced in what it feels like to be at the literal lowest depths of human life, right? So understand that that's part of my perspective. But the reality is this. People think that people are scared by this idea that everything in their life is their fault, right? When in reality, if we take radical accountability for everything in our life, and I say, yes, all of the bad things that have happened to me are my fault. Well, I just made my life a lot easier. And all of a sudden I'm free, because if it's all my fault, that means that I have the power to change all of it. So that's a realization that really, really changed my life. And understanding that, and understanding that actually discipline is not hard, but that discipline is the thing that makes life really easy, was probably the biggest unlock.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I fully agree, because I remember when I first got started, the decision to or to not do something is equally your fault. The decision to read or not to read, that's your choice. And it creates a ripple effect. And one of my favorite quotes is, look at the people that are hanging around you now, and the habits that you have now. If you don't change them, you've already arrived 5 years from now of where you're going to be. You already know what that ripple effect looks like. You already know the ladder that you're climbing. Or maybe you're not even climbing a ladder. Maybe you're just coasting. And if you're coasting, you're dying, in my opinion. Like, you can't do that with your business. You have to have growth in order to actually sustain team, employees, all that kind of stuff, and even your brand, right? So I think that was really great what you said, again, around just taking that ownership, man. Because, there's a lot of kids that like to point fingers, because I think it's easier to point fingers with this stuff. But it's also easy to take responsibility with this as well. So it's either a weapon or a tool. And you can either harness it or be slave to it.
Yeah, dude. I mean, this crazy podcast studio and penthouse unit that you're right now it's not because of decisions you made this morning. It's because of decisions you made 6 months ago, right? Or a year ago, or 5 years ago. And somebody asked me, I did a Q&A the other day. Somebody asked me, how do I focus on the long term? And how do I zoom out and stay focused on the longer term objective? And what I said is that you focus on the now, right? Because what you do now is what's responsible for where you are years down the line, right? And if I have an objective, my process is simply, let's say I want to get 1 million views on YouTube. And that's my long-term objective. Okay, if I want to get 1 million views on YouTube, how many views do I need to get a month? What's 1 million divided by 12? Like a little bit, like 80,000.
333.
Okay, so if I'm going to post one YouTube video a week, then I just need to get one video with 20,000 views a week. Okay, well, what do I need to do to post one YouTube video that gets 20,000 views a week? Well, I need the thumbnail, I need the title, I got to record it, I got to edit it, I got to post it, it has to be about a good topic. So what is my 7-day repeating schedule of daily actions that allows me to do that on a weekly basis, right? And now, if I wake up tomorrow and I focus on the now, those repeating objectives that I work back to for my long-term objective, the way that I focus on the future is to focus on today. And when I'm there in 6 months and things are going well, instead of coasting and being comfortable, I'm going to even more urgently want to plan harder and work harder, because what I do then, it's not going to collapse in a day. But if I fuck off and start relaxing then, well, I'll fall from grace another half of a year, then I'll have to start all over.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's really important to understand as well.
And you just talked about designing your future and mapping it back. I freaking love that, dude, because did the same thing in business 2 years ago. I remember I went to an event and it changed my life because it was actually tactical and operational of how to map out. Because I do had to build teams, I had agencies and stuff. We knew how to get a desired result. But mapping out expansionary plans in business with people and careers and lives and stuff like that, instead of an algorithm, like actually just doing it based off of human life. We had hit our quarterly objective. We had to like a couple $1 million in a month. And I had everything planned out or in that quarter rather, I had everything planned out to the T, down to the debt, the expenses, everything that we had. And I was off by $1,000, but $1,000 of profit from just designing it all. It was freaking crazy. And that was like that instant feedback from, 90 days of work, seeing it all pan out how I designed it in my mind. And I think when you're talking about information, it's kind of the expansion of your canvas. And you become an artist in content, mapping it back about how much do you need to get to the 1 million views or 1 million, whatever, right? Same thing with money. So how do you understand money? You got to first learn the fundamentals there to then be able to have a canvas.
You know why that's the case? Have you heard of the 1 in 60 rule before? No. So there's this thing that pilots use called the 1 in 60 rule, which means that when 1 degree difference doesn't seem like very far, right? If I turn my hand by 1 degree, it's like that much. If my plane is pointed 1 degree off course whenever I take off, 60 miles later, I will be an entire mile off course. i.e. that lake I thought I was going to fly over might be me going headfirst into a mountain, right? Mm-hmm. Which means that if you do not know exactly where you want to go, you're going to end up crashing into a mountain or flying into a storm, right? Conversely, if you know exactly where you want to go, because most people are like very motivated, right? Oh, I want to get rich. Okay. Like how many dollars? Okay. What industry do you think you should work in to do that? Okay. Like what's your exact plan, right? Conversely, if you know exactly where you want to go, and you are like a relatively smart individual with access to the internet, like there is no way you can fail, right? If you try something for long enough, there's no way you could fail. I tried random shit and failed for the first 23 years of my life. And then my life changed forever in 3 weeks. Like I've tried. And then whenever I actually learned the importance of planning, instead of just throwing random shit at the wall, I realized that instead of failing for 23 years, I could have figured it out a lot sooner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, planning's super important to your point.
But in those waves too, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and I remember I had my first, one of my first mentors told me this. I was still broke. I was like driving a beat up 1996 Maxima. And I said, dude, my goal is $100K a month in income. How do I get there incrementally by like $1,000 at a time, $10,000 at a time? It's like, dude, that's not how it works. I'm like, what? Like, I got a paycheck of like $2,000. I got a stack, right? He's like, no, dude, it comes in waves. He ended up doing like 60 million in 18 months. Just cut opportunity, cut trend, cut that pendulum. And I was just like, what the hell? He had this massive compound out in California. Still has it, but I was getting myself around that. And I was just like, you're telling me when the time that I just enrolled into school to now you've made $60 million. Yeah. What the fuck, dude? Like, this is fucking bullshit. Yeah. I'm not doing 2K a month anymore. Postmates. I'm not doing any of that. So, but a lot of entrepreneurs, they think it's that incremental growth because I thought it was because that's how I was raised when you're first getting started. But no, it comes in those waves. You said 3 weeks change your life. Dude, when you're around the right people, it happens fast. It only takes a year, 2 years to really figure this shit out and then get to a different playing field. And then those games play a lot longer to fulfill that end vision, whether it's 1 million views on a YouTube channel or if it's compounding to 10 million, then 50 million, then 100 million, like those may take longer, but it's getting that first spike to then give you some room to create that window to then go and hit those other goals.
Life is like a accrual-based accounting. And what I mean by that is that you do pay for everything over time. So if you know somebody and they have some massive success, right? And they make $1 million in a week. Well, there's two options. Either they paid for that moment with work, perseverance, and knowledge over however many months or years before that. So maybe they didn't make $1 million in a week. Maybe they really made $1 million over 10 years, and we divide that out monthly, and it was actually kind of a reasonable monthly amount. Or they got lucky and they didn't work for it before. But guess what? They're going to pay for it afterwards. If that's the case. Either way, life has a funny way of making you pay for everything that you receive. But some people put in the years of work it takes to become an overnight success. And some people understand that principle, right? Other people point the finger, call them lucky, and do everything but understand that they could do the same thing with the right information and with the right level of determination. And I truly believe, and I know it sounds like I have kind of an extreme viewpoint on this, but like I really, everything I do is like based around this idea that anybody who has some modicum of self-discipline and intelligence can be wildly successful and do things they thought were impossible with an iPhone or a laptop. Like that's all it takes. And I think 99% of the battle is believing it, right? Because like the average person is going to look at what you have accomplished. Oh, that's impossible. Okay, but have you tried? Right? Or like the average person thinks getting in really good shape is really hard. Okay, how many days in a row have you executed on the diet that you know you need to eat and exercise the way that you should? Have you tried it? Have you done it for 30 days? What about 60? What about 100? And I hope that as we have conversations like these, like it can just help close the gap and make people realize that like, oh, I don't have to keep preparing. Like, oh, there's nothing else that I need other than to start. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think I wish that I had thought that at 17 instead of at 23 years old.
And it's not a vision problem that most people have. It's a depth perception problem. So the example is, hey, you have binoculars, but you haven't flipped. And I think the mindset that I've always had, studio didn't happen overnight. I had a lot of people help me along the way to put this thing together because I'm not a camera guy. I'm like not a techie like that. But I think what's really interesting about that whole concept of compounding is you first got to visualize it. Then, like you said, map it back and say, hey, what are the things that are needed? What would need to be true in order for that to occur? And if that were true, what would prevent me from doing it? And I think that's the whole information highway thing. And I've always told myself, even if it's in the gym or even if it's, I've recently got the gym stuff, but even if it's in business, like what if that's the one thing that's true that then unlocks the thing? You're one hire away, you're one knowledge or piece of information away to deploy on the leverage that you build to actually make a 10x difference. And it's a interesting concept to play in this world of thinking through things and psychology and reading and really just giving things a lot of thought when you make your action for 2 years from now, 3 years from now, how that compounds. So, man, I think there's a lot of nuggets in this podcast, and I think there's a lot for people to think about. And so what would be, one or two things that you would leave people with to not only crystallize and just take action on, but just to wake them up and be like, hey, man, you're right there. Or, hey, girl, you're right there. Just keep going. What would you give people at this stage?
Everything that you need to change your life is free and readily available to you if you're able to see this podcast. Costs $0 to get up before sunrise tomorrow. It costs $0 to learn breath work. It costs $0 to acknowledge the importance of meditation, to acknowledge the importance of diet, to acknowledge the importance of taking care of your body and mind. And as a matter of fact, almost all of the information that you need to get started and start traveling down a path that you actually want to live is also available for free on the internet and at a max going to cost you $50 to $100 in books, right? And out of every single ROI you could find, right? Oh, the next 100x coin. Oh my God, this is going to be 1,000x. What about $10 for .com secrets to make $1 million? What's that number, right? So everything that you need, you already know. And the last thing that I'll say is this. Almost everybody knows what they need to do, right? As a matter of fact, knows exactly what they need to do in order to accomplish what they want to accomplish. What they simply underestimate is how many times they're going to have to do that thing for how long. So the more days you wait, the further you are delaying the inevitable success that you deserve and that you are destined for. So I urge you to understand that you can get, as soon as you close your laptop watching this, all the information you need and that you can start today. That's it.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. I think that was really awesome, guys. Where can they find you, by the way, Champ?
My handle is Champ T Graham on everything. I like to post videos on YouTube. I like to go on Instagram. I get on Twitter a lot. And I run community called Champs Only. Like I said, one of the biggest trading communities in crypto on the internet. And I have an entire stack of experiences over at my second company called Off the Grid for people who want to learn how to either get started in internet business or grow brands online, right? So I'm not going to advertise anything for anybody who's interested. DM me. I read almost everything.
Awesome.
And yeah, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, sure thing. We'll go ahead and link things in the description, guys. If you found value, and if you're an entrepreneur that's really trying to grow, you got to subscribe to the podcast, man. Go ahead and like it, share this, and give it to a friend, buddy, colleague, family member, whoever. We want to try and make as much impact as we can. And so with that said, guys, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.